Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am here for my LCS Finals overview and analysis. This is the last of our major region playoff videos. We've gone through every single other region's playoffs, and we are finishing it off here with North America's championship game. So, let me know down in the comment section below how you guys felt about this series. Did it go as you expected? Did it go not as you expected? Obviously, it was definitely something, and we'll be getting into what exactly happened, but you know I love hearing from you guys down there. What did you think of the series? Was it fun to watch? Did the team you expected to win? All of that good stuff. I love chatting it up with you guys down there, but I really don't want to waste too much time because there is quite a bit of good stuff to talk about in this video. Obviously, like I said, the last playoff video, I'll have a little bit of news for some of the Worlds content that I'm going to be putting out on this channel at the end of the video, so if you're interested in that, feel free to stick around until the end, but let's go ahead and jump right into our coverage of the LCS Finals, and it was definitely an interesting Finals matchup that we had on paper, as we had the number 5 seeded and the winners of winners bracket, Cloud9, taking on the number 2 seeded 100 Thieves, who had to come through losers after losing in winners finals to Cloud9. Another winners finals rematch that really felt like what we got. Well, it is what we got in every single region that it was applicable for so far in the major regions, and so definitely an interesting matchup. Obviously, Cloud9 was very confidently able to take it the first time around, mostly because Jensen was just really, really good in the mid lane. Abadage has been a focal point for 100 Thieves, and he has certainly been questionable as of recently, and by recently I mean pretty much the entirety of the summer split. He's going to really need to step up if 100 Thieves wants a chance. Obviously, you've got Blabber and Berserker on the side of Cloud9, who are really clicking. Fudge has probably been the best top laner in the region in the playoffs, and Sven just enables all of it. Everybody on 100T is talented enough to be able to take their lanes, but they are going to have to show up and prove that they can do it here in order to successfully get that. So, what ended up happening here in this series? Well, we can start off with game number 1, and game number 1 was a Cloud9 victory. They continue their momentum roll, coming in from winners finals, really not settling down ever since they beat CLG in that game 5. They really, put the pressure on EG in the second round, and then in winners finals, they absolutely beat up on 100 Thieves. Honestly, Cloud9 looks really, really good right now, mostly because the talent that we know this team has is really stepping up. I've talked about how I thought Fudge is the best top laner in the region right now. Well, Someday was in the regular season, but Fudge was in the playoffs so far. Blabber is probably the best jungler in the region. Berserker is the best AD carry in the region. We know that this team can be incredibly deadly, and boy did they show up here in game number 1. They actually pull out, a channel favorite comp of mine, the Nocturne Kennen. I talk about this a lot, talked about this in the LPL, and then when it was attempted to be pulled out in the LEC, but it certainly worked here better than it did in Europe, because you put the Nocturne on Blabber this time on the jungler. I actually think that gives you a little bit more flexibility. You can have Jensen on something that's a little bit more playmaking in the mid lane that you can create plays around, rather than having the Nocturne be entirely dependent on what the jungler wants to do, especially in the mid game. And I think that definitely helps out the scaling of the comp when you're not as proficient on some of these champions, but we know Blabber plays a lot of Nocturne. This is something that he's pulled out multiple times throughout the history of the LCS. Big in game number 1 here. Fudge is going to pull out the Kennen, and obviously I've talked about why I think this comp is so deadly. When Nocturne turns the lights out, you have a flanking Kennen. You have really no way to track him as long as you weren't on vision before the lights went out, and then he can just blow up the backline. You have extra follow-up. You have LeBlanc to pick one target and just say, screw them, I'm going to try and kill them. And then you have the Zeri to do consistent damage. You have the Lulu protecting the Kennen or the Nocturne, whoever ends up going in at that point as well. And so overall, just a really, really good comp here. A really aggressive comp, one that I really like for Cloud9, because what they do really well, I think, is take advantage of weakened enemy states. Their team fighting has been very good towards the mid-game mark, and I think that this accentuates a lot of the positives that they've been able to generate. But while the Kennen Nocturne, I think, is kind of the focal point of what they intended to do in draft, player of the game has to go to Berserker in the bottom lane, who just continues to show day in and day out why so many people are starting to consider him by far the best AD carry in North America. Him coming over for Cloud9, obviously he's had his ups and downs. I actually wasn't as high on him in summer as I was in spring. I thought after spring he was clear-cut the number 1 AD carry in North America. Go check out my mid-season player rankings videos for that, but Over the course of summer, he really took a backseat to Blabber on this team in terms of the proactivity that they wanted to do in the regular season. That has, again, basically flipped back around in the playoffs, where Berserker has really taken a much bigger role. Blabber still being incredibly aggressive, and Jensen and Fudge really doing a great job facilitating that, but Berserker, I think towards the mid to late game, has really started to unlock himself again, and has really, really looked phenomenal on this Zeri over the course of the playoffs. Obviously wasn't great at the beginning of the playoffs with Zeri. That CLG series was something that I think was really, really questionable for Berserker in general, but he really has been able to turn that around. He's basically learned the champion throughout the course of the playoffs, and it culminates here in Game 1 of the LCS Finals, where he dominates and is a pretty easy choice for player of the game. A lot of credit to Sven as well, but big credit to Blabber on this Nocturne. Was creating so much across the map, was able to get Jensen pretty far ahead on the LeBlanc in the early game, and then he was just able to go wherever he wanted. Closer was really never going to be able to be in a position to stop him. Obviously, the W can be a little bit annoying for Nocturne, just because there are quite a few things that he wants to go in on, but at the end of the day, just wasn't able to work out. Obviously, we'll get to 100 Thieves comp in a bit, because in certain circumstances, I would like what they did, but it was the execution of what they had that I didn't really like all that much. But overall, I would say that Cloud9 basically took what they had and executed on it as perfectly as possible. The cannon wasn't all that important this game, but the Zeri, the Lulu, the Nocturne, they were all absolutely massive for C9, and a huge reason why they were able to dominate this game. As for 100 Thieves, I kind of like this draft. I'm not going to sit here and say it's completely draft gap. I know a lot of people will talk about the Malphite pick in the top lane and say how useless that is, but I think a lot of people would say that that is useless because it lost. This is, again, I think, results-based analysis, which I don't really like to subscribe to. I like to think about the idea of, okay, well, what happens if this works? And if this works, you just win the game. Your team fight is so ridiculously strong and actually unstoppable that if you get to that mid to late game and you're relatively even, you're just simply going to win the game. Against Nocturne Kennen, nobody on this team really is all that scared of being blown up, except for maybe the Soraka, but you actually have countermeasures to be able to deal with that. You have Azir to be able to disengage, you have Poppy to be able to disengage, and that full engage from Malphite actually counters the Kennen relatively well. Really what you want to do with the Malphite into Kennen matchup is you want to try and play for the late game, and Someday actually was able to generate a decent amount in the early game, just wasn't able to convert it into really anything, was dying a bit for it. Blabber ended up getting quite a bit of gold off of him, so did Jensen, and so you really got to this point in the mid game where they weren't, unfortunately, able to succeed on the idea of the comp. That's where I think I would have preferred something else besides the Poppy in the jungle, maybe something that was going to be a little bit more proactive in the early game. Obviously, you had a ton of junglers banned in this game, whether it was the Trundle, the Wukong, the Sejuani, all of them were banned in this game, but that still leaves up quite a few options. I think Xin Zhao would have been incredibly interesting in this comp, and I think it really could have worked, or something of that nature. You know, I think things like that, even, you know, because it's closer, something like a Lee Sin could have worked. I think something like Lee Sin doesn't scale nearly as well, but if you could have generated that lead for your Sivir in the bot lane, or for your Malphite in the top lane, or something like that, I definitely think you would be on a better track. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't understand the draft at all, because I do. I get what they were going for, it just didn't quite work. But Someday wasn't really the problem in this game, even if the Malphite didn't do a ton of work. In my opinion, the problem was FBI in the bottom lane, him and Huhi just got outplayed by Berserker and Sven. There's really no other way to put it. Berserker and Sven were phenomenal in this game, especially in the 2v2 in the laning phase. They were able to generate that lead, translate that a lot into the late game, and Berserker's damage towards the back half was phenomenal. But this comp for 100 Thieves is relying a lot on FBI being able to do a ton on the Sivir, and it just was not happening in game number 1. The Soraka is a good pick. I talk about it a lot on the channel, but you do have to be in a position for her to be able to unlock the rest of the team. When you're playing from behind, and especially when your AD carry is not generating that pressure on his own, you're just not going to be able to win with it. It's really not going to be able to scale into that late game like you need it to. It's there for the team fights, and it really wasn't able to be utilized in the way it needed to this game. Huhi's power spike was hit so late into the game. So overall, just not a perfect game from 100T. FBI is going to get the dud of the game in game number 1. Berserker, the player of the game, in game number 1. Things that would need to change, I think 100T just needs to invest a tad bit more into the early game. I get it, you want to be able to dominate these late game team fights because that's where you think you can generate an advantage over this Cloud9 team, and you know, I understand the thinking behind that, but you can't just completely forego the early game. There's really no one on this team that's going to be able to win lane entirely successfully. Maybe the Poppy in the goal. That's it, really, at that point, and if you have laners coming to help out Blabber, there's really not much of a shot. So overall, I would say just maybe invest a little bit more into that part of the game, and just try to get a little bit more of an early lead so that you can translate that into the late game. As for Cloud9, just continue this. This was a really good combo. I think your players are showing that they can just out-mechanically skill the others. Just give them 1v1 or 2v2 matchups that they know they can win, that they know they can get proactive on, and they're going to be able to consistently generate those leads. So, yeah, was Cloud9 able to do that in game number 2, or was 100 Thieves going to bounce back, tie the series up at 1-1, and make things even again? Well, the winner of game number 2 was Cloud9. They are able to take game number 2 here and go up 2-0 in this series. A huge advantage for most teams. However, obviously, we've talked about this throughout every single region's playoffs. The amount of reverse sweeps and just game 5s in general that we've gotten, not only in every region, but most especially here in the LCS, is absolutely absurd. So I would not put it past 100T to be able to mount a little bit of a comeback here. But Cloud9 definitely doing what they need to do here in game number 2 to be able to go up 2-0, to be able to put themselves in a good position. And this is just your prototypical Cloud9 draft. This just goes back to what they've been doing all playoffs long, what has generated a bit of success for them. It's pretty off meta, but if it works, it works. You go for a really early game carry jungler in the Wukong, which I think is very successful for Blabber, something that he's really shown to be incredibly proactive on, something that when it's up, I would just highly recommend Cloud9 go to every time. It's basically perfect for what Blabber wants to do in the game. It can generate leads early, it can fight early, but it doesn't exactly fall off entirely late. It can still make a huge impact in the team fights as a main engager, and so overall, I really like the Wukong for Blabber here. I think it's a good pick. Obviously, the Zillion for Jensen in the mid lane, something that they've gone to consistently over the course of the year. One of Jensen's best picks of all time. Obviously, him and Bjergsen have really made that champion famous at this point. But Jensen just looks fine in this game, again, enabling Blabber, making sure that Wukong is able to do whatever he wants. You've got the hyper carry in the bot lane with Sven on the Yuumi, kind of something that they've gone to a ton. Yuumi is Sven's most played champion this year by far. Lulu's really the only other one with any sort of relevance in that conversation, but Lulu and Yuumi are really the only two that Sven has played. So getting that, as well as that late game hyper carry, that's something that can take over in the late game team fights like the Sivir for Berserker, is absolutely huge. And then something that can pressure in the top lane, in this case the Jax, because you have Someday on the Fiora. Obviously this is a pick that Someday has gone to pretty consistently throughout the playoffs as well. Something that actually caused Cloud9 a little bit of trouble last time they played, because they weren't ready to be separated quite like Fiora likes to do, pull them apart. But the Jax is a great answer, obviously just equally as good in the split push, and can be a little bit more difficult to actively duel for Fiora. I really like that matchup for Jax, and I think it really, really came in Fudge's favor in this game. But you could say that for most of the things for Cloud9 in this game, because they, again, just dominated it. I think 100T had more of a shot in this one than they did in game number 1, where it really felt like they were outclassed pretty early, but man, Cloud9's just better. Like, they're just simply the better team, and they're playing like it right now. Player of the game was a pretty easy choice for me. It's going to go to Blabber in the jungle on this Wukong. A phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal game 2, early game from him. I'm going to say this, I've said this on the channel before, and I've gotten a little bit of pushback for this, but I think you can take any endemic regional North American talent ever and put them up against Blabber, and Blabber, I would take Blabber. Like, in terms of just talent level, I would take Blabber over any other North American player ever. I think he has that kind of effect on the game. He is genuinely a world caliber player, like a world-class caliber player out of North America. I think that's absolutely huge. There's a reason I always have him considered as the most valuable piece in North America, because I just don't think you find players of that talent level that are North American as often as you would want. But Blabber is one of those players that can genuinely just take over a season, and he's really starting to do that for Cloud9. His aggressive nature is being backed up by Jensen, by Sven, even Fudge, who on the Jax was able to get a lot from Blabber's aggressiveness in this game. There was a lot of aggression in the top lane because of it. He benefited a lot, was able to help out Blabber consistently in those jungle fights. That 2v2 combo with Jensen coming in potentially for 3v3s made it basically unstoppable, and really there was not a ton that 100 Thieves could do in this game to do basically anything. I mean, they were incredibly tilted, but gotta give a lot of credit to Blabber for being able to create on the Wukong. His engages were sublime. He was really never in any position to die, especially towards the back half of the game. When he started getting the Yuumi on top of him, it was really just over at that point. And Blabber was never going to be in a position to die because he plays his Wukong so well and he's so aggressive with it. But the other player that I thought was really phenomenal, again, no shock to anybody, is going to be Berserker again here. And what a great laning phase. You go for the Sivir Zeri handshake, something that we're seeing everywhere around the world right now, and Berserker dominates this laning phase. You get that hyper carry with the Yuumi combo, something that they have really perfected in terms of the 2v2 in lane on Cloud9, and boy did they show that in this game. The 2v2 was devastating. There really wasn't a lot of jungle intervention from either side. Blabber really wasn't bot lane all that much, and Closer certainly wasn't bot lane all that much, and so it really was just Berserker and Sven versus FBI and Huhi. And FBI and Huhi certainly lost that matchup by a considerable margin. Berserker is simply just better, and it's really showing here. FBI is one of the best AD carries that we've seen in the region, especially in lane. It was really his calling card on Golden Guardians, and then early time on 100 Thieves. He's become a more balanced player, but let's not forget that FBI is phenomenal in lane, and Berserker and Sven really just dominated them in this game, in game 1 as well. Really, really impressive stuff from them. Just another example of like why they're the best bot lane in North America right now, or at least definitely up there for that. And so, yeah, I mean, just a dominant performance from them. And then credit to Fudge on the Jax. Like I said, challenging Someday here on the Fiora. Someday has been phenomenal over the course of the regular season. On the split push champions, there's something that he's really been able to unlock a lot of what 100T has wanted to do over the course of the year. On the Fiora specifically, he did it in the playoffs. He did it against EG, where he was really able to take over a lot of the map, and Fudge calls his bluff. He answers here, and he really steps up to the plate, and he knocks it out of the park. A great game of Jax from him. You get to this point in the late game where you've got, what, like 4 or 5 basically melees on the side of 100T, and a Jax with a Yuumi. Like, it's just never going to go well at that point. Really not much you can do, but overall, great game from Cloud9. Not so much of a great game for 100 Thieves. I get what you want to do in draft, but again, I'm really not a fan of the Jarvan pick. I've talked about this. Really, the only player that's been able to pull that off successfully is Malrang right now, and that's just because he's so clearly better at the enemy on Jarvan than the enemy is playing against Jarvan. But Jarvan really isn't all that good right now. He's relatively squishy for someone who has to go in all the time, and we definitely saw that, him getting blown up very, very quickly in these games. But even outside of that, like, his damage really isn't all that there. He's just there for basically the knockup and the Cataclysm, and I don't think that that's worth it enough to be able to do anything, and clearly, he really wasn't able to have any sort of early aggression against Blabber and the Wukong in this game. A lot of that was because, again, Someday got behind, Abadage got very behind in the mid lane, a lot of pressure being thrown at him there, and then obviously bot lane lost as well. It's really hard to win when you have 3 losing lanes, but even at the same time, like, the Jarvan really wasn't going to help a situation like that. He wasn't going to be able to create a ton for his team, and so not a huge fan of that pick. Like I said, Someday and Abadage both lost pretty hard. Abadage especially towards the back half of the game was just going in on Silas and dying on repeat, but done of the game has to go again to FBI in the bottom lane, who again just basically got outplayed. He had a really bad early game, I would say, against the Sivir. Started to relax, I think, a bit in the mid game, was starting to kind of get back, but towards the end game here, where the team fights really started to take off, I'd say end game, the game of 24 minutes, but like towards the, the last few parts of the game here, where the team fights really started to take off, he was mispositioned all the time, really wasn't able to hit anybody with the Zeri, was just basically standing over the wall, throwing out W's when he could, and not hitting anybody with the Q. Like, you have to simply be more aggressive. It's the LCS finals. If he's going to play so passive, he's never really going to be in a position to do anything, and then when he did go in, he was constantly out of position. Constantly in a position where he was getting caught and dying. Overall, just FBI has not been showing up in the finals so far. He definitely is going to have to turn around his gameplay in order to really give 100 Thieves a chance at all. This is such a bot-centric meta that if they're getting blown back in the bot lane like they have been in the first 2 games, I don't really see a world in which 100T has a shot. But you're now down 0-2, so you definitely have to start stepping things up. I need to see a different jungler from Closer. It can't be the Jarvan. I would even rather see the Poppy. I know it didn't work in game 1, but I'd rather see that than the Jarvan. I think, obviously, trying to steal the Wukong away would be better. Hell, even something like a Xin Zhao, like I said, I think kind of fits this team's playstyle and what it wants to do, even if it's not the strongest thing in the meta right now. I just need to see an adjustment. An adjustment somewhere. I don't, like, this jungle cannot be the same over the next 2 games. It has been way too passive in the early game. Clearly, split pushing I don't think is going to work for 100T if Cloud9 is just going to call the bluff. I think you need to go full, help the team fight, try to enable the jungle, get that early lead. I never want to recommend something like this, but something like a Renekton potentially I think could be good. I know obviously it was banned out in this game, but if it's available, just that kind of idea of a pick. Even the Aatrox, I know it really hasn't been working for 100T over the course of this, playoff run, but it's still Someday's best champion historically, and I think he can still do something on it. Just something that can help out the team, I think, a little bit more. Outside of that, you really just need your bot lane to step up. That's what needs to change going into game 3. Cloud9 just needs to run it back. Honestly, they've cracked the code. As long as they can just keep doing this, they don't need to change absolutely anything. So, can Cloud9 come away with the sweep? Do they really have 100T's number, and are they really, truly the most dominant team in the LCS after finishing 5th in the regular season, or is 100T at least going to send this to a game 4 and give themselves another chance to potentially outlast a team in the playoffs here? Well, the winner of game number 3 was Cloud9, they are able to do it. They win game number 3. They sweep 100 Thieves, the first sweep of the LCS playoffs, which is insane considering a large majority of these games went to 5. And man, does this Cloud9 team look good. They look dominant in this series. They clearly were the better team. They were the better team the first time these two played, maybe by a little bit of a smaller margin, but I mean, this was not at all in the same ballpark. You've got to be incredibly excited if you're a Cloud9 fan because you are now the 2022 LCS Summer Champions. Obviously, 3 titles in 3 splits. We'll get to that a little bit later. Let's talk about Game 5, or Game 3, I should say. It's not Game 5, it's the last game. Game 3 here, first of all. Man, I feel like every single game here had a very similar script in terms of what Cloud9 wanted to do. They very much came in with a game plan, and they executed on that game plan, which is just, our bot lane is better than their bot lane. Let's have our bot lane win the game. And boy, did they do that. I mean, they absolutely smurfed this series, Berserker and Sven did. Berserker's gonna get my player of the game in game number 3 here. Just another phenomenal performance from the rookie, might I add. Not only rookie to the LCS, the rookie. This guy was playing in Korean Challengers last year, yes, for T1. But let's not forget, yes, that team finished first in spring, but they finished last in summer in the Challengers Korea League. So it's not like T1 Challengers was dominating the league. He comes in here, obviously one of the most talented players we have seen come into North America in a long time, and he's able to dominate these LCS finals, completely outclassing both FBI, Huhi, Closer, all of them, was simply just better than them, and proved it game in and game out. He gets the Sivir here, and he gets the Lulu with it, obviously a little bit of a draft gap here from Cloud9, in my opinion. We've talked about this a bit on the channel, but the Sivir Zeri handshake can definitely be good for both sides, but that is assuming that both sides have a top-tier enchanter with them. If only one side has a top-tier enchanter with them, it all of a sudden becomes significantly more difficult for the other side to win the game. You've got the Lulu on the side of Cloud9, but they ban out the Yuumi. That's not available here, so when FBI takes, they're on blue side, when they take Zeri first, the Cloud9 can pretty confidently answer the Lulu, and now 100T doesn't really have a support to be able to complement that Zeri in the way that they would want her to. So they have to go with the Alistar, who I get is pretty decent in his Sivir, but really can just get hard countered by the Lulu on the engage. And so overall, I just really don't like this opportunity overall for 100T. I don't like this draft. There were other things about this that I didn't like all that much, but we'll get to that when we start talking about that team. Really, I think C9 took advantage of that early game lead that they were able to generate in the bot lane, and boy, howdy did Berserker just run this game. Completely dominant, only died once this series, completely unheard of. Sven also only died once this series, to point out, but this bot lane just completely smurfed on 100 Thieves so hard to the point where, I don't want to say they single-handedly won the series, but like, what a series from them. Absolutely dominant. And of course, you can't talk about players that won the series for their team without talking about Blabber in the jungle, who I think a lot of people talk about him not being clutch because he goes to these international events and isn't quite as dominant, even though he had a really good Worlds last year. Let's not forget that a big reason they were able to get out of groups last year was Blabber playing out of his mind, but Blabber really showed up here in LCS Finals, and you just got to be happy for him. This is somebody who clearly this means a lot to. It really has never felt like Blabber's been able to get over the hump in the LCS. There's always been that one last team in the way that he has not been able to conquer, and he finally does it here in summer. He dominates, 2-time MVP, now technically a 2-time champion, but kind of a 3-time champion here in the LCS. There really aren't a lot of native and North American players with his kind of resume, with his kind of play. He not only is, got the accolades, he's got the rings, he's got the MVPs, but he's the dominant force on the C9 team. He's the one that they build everything around. He's the one that they play entirely around. That top side of Fudge and Jensen, they are all basically there to enable Blabber to win the game for them. And that kind of responsibility for you to be able to dominate games like that is really, really fantastic. A great series overall from Blabber. Another great game from him. On the Wukong, he's absolutely insane on those engages in the back half of the game. Jensen really adapted to his role phenomenally well. Obviously, he had some really down points during the regular season, but as soon as this team found out that, okay, we don't need to play meta, we can start playing these supportive mid laners that just want to enable our jungle, and we can have Jensen be a secondary piece on this team. I think everything for Cloud9 has unlocked since then. Obviously, he had a great series against 100 Thieves in the Winners Finals. Not quite as, a much of a focal point in this series, but obviously 2 games of Zillion, a game of LeBlanc, definitely still able to contribute on the map, mostly to just enabling the rest of the team to be able to do basically whatever they want. Those revives are absolutely clutch. Even the speed ups, absolutely huge. And then Fudge was clearly the best top laner in the region in the playoffs. It really wasn't even all that close. Someday was a very easy choice for first team All-Pro for me. He was actually second in my MVP voting, but Fudge outclassed him in both of the series that they played against each other. Gotta be happy with Fudge's development. Basically everything went well for Cloud9 in this game, and you've gotta love it. As for 100 Thieves, you couldn't quite get the job done here in finals. Same story in both spring and summer for this roster, unfortunately, but you are going to Worlds. Not too much to worry about. There definitely is quite a bit, though, that you need to fix. Number one, I think Closer just got completely outplayed in the series, and he's honestly been a little bit of a downer for 100 Thieves over the course of the year. Now, I'm not going to say it's entirely, Closer's fault that they lost the series. It certainly isn't, but I just want to see more aggressive picks. He goes from Poppy to Jarvan back to Poppy. Those just aren't picks that I'm all that confident about, taking over in the early game. I want to see more aggressive picks from him, even if it's Lee Sin. I know I'm not a Lee Sin fan, but he plays Lee Sin at a different level. Maybe not at the World Championships, but in finals, why not pull it out here in game number 3? I just don't understand overall what the thought process is behind it. I think it's a little bit being too much of a slave to what the meta is right now and not adapting to what your team has success with, but he really needs to step up and be a little bit more confident if this team wants to have a chance of really beating anybody at Worlds. Someday definitely needs to get his form back. Obviously, another game with him on the Fiora. This has been something that 100 Thieves has found success with throughout the year, but it was not going to work in this series, and I'm getting a little concerned about this roster because of their unwillingness to adapt. It really felt like once they got down in the series, they didn't really have a backup plan for what they wanted to go to. They just tried to force the same strategies that they had been losing on in the first 2 games here again in game number 3, and it just wasn't going to work out. And so definitely not happy about that. Even if Someday did play relatively well in this game, by far the most impactful member of 100 Thieves in game number 3, he ended up having to team fight all the time towards the back half of this game because there was absolutely no way 100 T could hold up, even in the 4v4. And so really, there was just, Someday had no impact on the game overall, even when he had gold. I want to see him be a more impactful team fighter. I think that's really where Someday can really make an impact and maybe hide some of the weaknesses that 100T has been throwing out there. FBI, who he got completely stomped in this series, they got absolutely run over by Berserker and Sven. Definitely need to see more consistency out of them. If they're going to be going against some of the best bot lanes in the world, we need to see what we had last year out of this bot lane and not what we saw in the playoffs here. And then Abadage certainly needs to start stepping up. I mean, he has been a complete non-factor for this 100 Thieves team throughout the entirety of 2022. Spring, summer, whatever. He has been along for the ride at best. He really has not been a contributing factor to any of their wins, and you need to start seeing him play more aggressive, play more as the carry, because right now it's just not happening for him. And so you hope that one day he's going to be able to figure that out at Worlds and be able to start competing again with some of the best. But again, that killer mentality that he had coming into 100 Thieves last year just seems to be gone from him right now. And he is certainly, in my opinion, the weak piece of 100 T. And you certainly do not want that in the mid lane in this meta. So where do I think 100 Thieves stands? Well, I'm not going to talk about the group draw. Yes, it has already happened. I have a video talking about all of the group draw scenarios on my channel. If you want to go see my live reactions to it, you can click on the video up in the iCard right now. But for 100 T, honestly, going to Worlds as the 2 seed isn't all that bad. We'll talk about why that's later, but honestly, at least you're going to Worlds, no plans. You've got some time to adjust. You just need to take what you need to learn from this series, learn what you need to adapt, learn how you need to maybe change your mindset going into these games, and then try to apply that to some of the better teams in the world. I definitely think this team has the talent to be able to compete at Worlds. It's just about whether or not they're going to be able to do it. As for Cloud9, phenomenal series. There's no shock as to who player of the series is. It's going to be Berserker. He's my finals MVP for Cloud9 here. The rookie getting finals MVP is absolutely huge. Blabber was a very close second, and then Sven, honestly, a pretty close third, but I mean, really, at the end of the day, there was no other choice other than Berserker. He absolutely dominated the bot lane, in lane, out of lane, and team fights wherever in this series. He was completely unstoppable, and you have to give him a lot of credit for that. If Cloud9 can maintain this form, I mean, they are going to be super, super dominant at Worlds, but we got to talk about it. Congratulations to Cloud9 for being your 2022 Summer Split champions in the LCS. Completely well-deserved. This organization has overcome a lot. Obviously, one of the most prestigious organizations in the region. They go a complete coaching overhaul towards the beginning of the year, abandon that basically in week 3 or week 4 of spring, are basically playing catch-up the rest of the year. They do basically a complete roster turnover. Fudge going back to the top lane, bringing Jensen back in. Sven comes in and plays support. a ton of changes going into summer, and somehow even getting the 5 seed in the regular season wasn't enough to stop this team from not losing a single playoff series in summer, and you've got to be excited for them. You've got players like Fudge and Berserker that, you know, are kind of newbies to the scene and have really only known a winning Cloud9 team, and really they've been pushing forward, and they've been huge pieces in their explosiveness, I should say, has been a really big positive for Cloud9. Their ability to dominate laning phase has been awesome for them, but you've got veterans like Blabber, like Jensen, like Sven, that this clearly means so much to. Sven putting aside his ego, saying, I don't need to be the carry, I know I've played ADC my entire career, but I'm going to role swap to support because I know that, you know, playing with Berserker is going to get me another championship, and it's going to give me a shot at Worlds, and he puts aside that ego and he goes and does that. Very, very huge from him. He has really unlocked his best self ever since coming over to Cloud9, whether it was when he was the best ADC in the region just a couple of years ago on C9, or right now where he has really become one of the more prolific supports for one of the most dominant bot lane duos. And then you have Blabber. You've got to feel good for Blabber. Like I said, 2-time MVP, now a 3-time champion. Kind of, obviously, they don't count spring of 2021 because technically it was all one season last year, but they did win spring, and so they went to MSI and everything, and so you got to feel happy about Blabber getting his unofficial 3rd trophy here. He has really cemented himself as one of the best junglers of all time in the LCS. I think we're talking about him and Xmithie as the 2 best of all time. Xmithie maybe with the accolades, but in terms of talent, I don't think anyone in the jungle position has ever been able to touch Blabber. And then Jensen in the mid lane, you've got to feel excited for him. Didn't even have a team in spring. Obviously, definitely had his growing pains and wasn't the most dominant player for this Cloud9 team, but he did his role. He did exactly what he needed to, and he finally gets a chance to hoist an LCS trophy on this Cloud9 organization. Obviously, he's had a few before, but all of them were with those Team Liquid super teams. He finally gets to go back to the team that started it all and hoist the LCS trophy. You've got to feel excited for this Cloud9 team. Hopefully they can continue this momentum. They have so much talent. This is really a team that I think talent-wise can compete with some of the best teams in the world. If they can maintain that momentum and move on further, I think this team is going to be very, very, very scary at the World Championships. All right, that is going to do it for my LCS Finals overview and analysis, and that's going to do it for my summer split coverage on this channel. We have finished all 4 major region playoffs, the LCS concluding here today. We've done it. We've gotten to the end, both me and you, if you've been around for the entire run. I very, 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 very much appreciate it. We've put a ton of work into this series, into every single region. So if you guys did enjoy the coverage, obviously today, leave a like. If you enjoyed the coverage of everything that we've been doing over the past few months, leave a like as well. And let me know down in the comment section below. It really means a lot that you guys have been enjoying the content, sticking around, commenting, liking, subscribing, all of that. Absolutely huge to me. But let's go ahead and talk about the 3 teams that are going to be going to Worlds from North America. Obviously, we just talked about Cloud9 and 100 Thieves, but we also have Evil Geniuses coming in as the 3rd seed, obviously losing that best of 5 to 100 Thieves for them to get here, but they're going to be in the play-in stage. What do these teams have to offer on the world stage? Well, I already talked a little bit about Cloud9. I do think that they're a pretty good team. The problem is, historically, 1 seeds at Worlds from North America are put in very, very tricky spots because it means that they typically have to face some of the best teams in the world in the lower region, like in the bigger regions, right? You have to play, you know, one of the best teams from Korea, one of the best teams from China, and that puts you in a really tricky spot to be able to get out of your group. Obviously, it's not impossible. 100 Thieves last year was actually relatively close to getting out of a group that had EDG in it, that had T1 in it. They took a game off of eventual world champions EDG, and so I'm not going to sit here and say that Cloud9 is impossible, and honestly, I think this Cloud9 team is better than last year's 100 Thieves team, if I had to say, but I definitely think it's going to be a little bit difficult for them to be favorites to get out of any group they get slotted into. Obviously, no spoilers. It's already happened, but no spoilers here. And then 2nd seed, 100 Thieves, usually in a much better spot to be able to get out of a group. Never perfect, but definitely usually given opportunities. And then the play-ins, obviously, for historically for NA, have been a ramp-up place for a lot of the teams that have eventually gotten out of groups from the LCS. EG could definitely be one of them this year. However, there's just so many good teams going to Worlds this year. It's going to take a great performance from any of these teams to be able to outlast any of the others at Worlds. But all of them are going to be going to Worlds, and they're going to have their shot to play against some of the best that League of Legends has to offer, and I'm very, very excited to see that. So Like I said, if you enjoyed the video, hit like. If you want to see the Worlds content that's going to be coming out, up on the screen right now, you're going to be seeing an updated version of the schedule that I will be using over the next few weeks, posting content. If you guys are excited for that, hit the subscribe button. It lets me know that you guys want to see it. Obviously, you can hit the bell if you want to get those notifications on when these videos go live. Going to be previewing every single group as well as the plans, doing my own top 20 list, a meta report, all of that stuff is going to be done coming into World. So if you are excited for that, let me know and hit that subscribe button. But with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.